Friends, through the story we hear of Elijah today, we learn about the importance of silence. Silence is where God is found. For Elijah, he's not in the wind, the earthquake, or the flame, but in the silence. We meet God also through our time of silent prayer. And so we ask ourselves, do I make time for silent prayer every day? At least 10 minutes every day. Of course, more is certainly very good too. Now, what is silent prayer after all? Well, it requires exterior silence as best as we can, cut out the noise in our lives, and hopefully a sense of interior silence. We do our best to focus on who we're with, God Himself. It's focusing on God, just being free with God, being timeless with God, resting with Him. We can let the ideas and thoughts and our hearts surface and bring those to our prayer to God, because often God is in the distractions. God is often in the interruptions. And so we have this free conversation with God alone, chatting with Him personally about, well, whatever we need and want to speak to Him about. Perhaps we can reflect on His love for us, His care, His presence, or some other part of our faith. And maybe you just set a 10-minute timer so you don't have to worry about the time. Maybe you can try that out today. We also learned today, though, that silence is fruitful, supernaturally fruitful. In his book, The Power of Silence, Cardinal Sarah says these words: Christ lived for 30 years in silence. Then, during his public life, he withdrew to the desert to listen to and speak with his Father. The world vitally needs those who go off into the desert because God speaks in silence. And today, look at what happens with Elijah. When he meets God in the silence, he receives some very important instructions in his silent prayer. For example, who to anoint king in Aram, who to anoint king over Israel. That's pretty big stuff. And the prophet who has been chosen to replace him, Elisha. Now, those are really important things that you might say he would have missed out if he didn't have that time of silent prayer. Who knows what kind of important things that God wants to bring your attention to speak to you about in your time of silent prayer today. And so today we ask ourselves, how can we seek the face of the Lord in that time of prayer? Maybe we could reflect in silence on the things we heard in today's gospel as well. How am I doing in following Jesus' teachings about avoiding lust or adultery, even adultery of the heart? How am I continuing to cut things out of my life that are not helping me love God and others, such as certain movies or TV shows or ways of using the phone or the internet? Am I getting any appropriate help to cut these things out of my life if they're not helping me be the best person I can be? If I'm married, we might ask during this silent time, do I love and sacrifice for my spouse now just as much as when I first married them? These are some of so many things we can speak to God about in our time of silence, in a time of sharing and listening to God. And we can do this wherever we are, before the Eucharist, whenever that's possible, in our home, on a walk, on the bus, in our car drive, anywhere, because God is everywhere. He is with us. Today, who knows what important things that God wants to tell you in your time of silent prayer. And so I invite you to spend that time with Him. Him who loves you with a love that is incomprehensibly beyond your imagination.